Excel is easily the most used spreadsheet software in the world, and it's worth knowing for a few different functionalities. And in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the basic overviews of the user interface, and also dive into a little bit of some of the functions that you can use at a basic level. Excel is really good for both beginners and advanced users. It has a super high skill ceiling to where if you really want to get really advanced, you can. Excel will grow with you over time. Diving into the user interface overview, right now we're taking a look at the Excel user interface. So right when you open up Excel, you'll get this greeting message that's like, hey, good evening. And you have a few options here. So you can do stuff like you can select a blank workbook. You can open up a recent file. So I have the file names blurred out just for privacy, but you can see that the files that I was working on recently are right here, ready for me to click on and get right back into. I can also open up a template. Let's say I'm pretty confident that I want to use a Gantt chart. Well, I can just go ahead and open that up. But for our purposes, we're going to start with a blank workbook and go right from there. So looking at what we have here, there's a few things worth noticing about what's going on. Okay, so one thing is that in this blank workbook, there's a number of blank cells in this sheet, and there's probably a few hundred here. This sheet is named Sheet 1 by default, so we can see down here below, Sheet 1. And then above all of these cells right here, we have 11 different tabs, and they are File, Home, Insert, etc. So here's what each of those do. File is where you can go to see your workbook's info. So if you want to check out the date at which the document was created, you can see that here. If you want to see who created it, you can check that out. If you have version history turned on, which you can turn that on or off, you can check out past versions of the workbook, which is pretty nice. You can also save this file as a specific file type or in a location. You can also export it to a PDF, to a CSV. There's a lot of options there. In the Home tab, that's where we're looking at right now. There's a lot of basic tools. Things like copy and paste over here, text and cell formatting, conditional formatting, and sorting. Insert in that tab is really great for adding a number of different objects into your spreadsheet, like tables, pictures, charts, and then even special text. Page layout controls the page and print setup. Formulas displays a lot of frequently used formulas, and then other more specific topical formulas that you can use, and we'll get into a few of those in a little bit. There's also a few related tools like calculation options. In data, this tab is all about how to go about retrieving and also transforming, cleaning, and forecasting from data. Review is all about taking a deep dive look into your workbook. Things like, are there any issues? Can I add comments so that people who are working on it in the future can see what I'm thinking, or maybe I can make comments for myself. Proofing, you can also protect the sheet or the whole workbook. You can even protect it with a password so people don't edit it. You can do that in Review. And then in View, this tab controls the ways in which each sheet is displayed in the user interface. In the Automate tab, we can see things that allow for recording actions, and we can also script custom programs. Help connects us to the web to allow us to get help from the community and from Microsoft themselves about any issues that we may have with our Excel file. Then finally, Acrobat is a native integration with Adobe Acrobat where we can create PDFs from our Excel workbook. There's also a few other functionalities we can do with that integration. So in terms of basic tools, so some things that we want to keep in mind for Excel is that you can do a lot of text editing and all that, but really the core of working in Excel is using rows and columns of data. And it can be data of pretty much any type that we can think of. So number data, text data. We're going to go ahead and create our own data table right now. It's going to be a simple 4 row by 3 column table. And we're going to go ahead and make our table all about breakfast foods. And if we're wondering how do we go about creating a table in Excel, so I'm going to zoom in real quick. We're going to go ahead and select the cell that we want to type in. So we can see that this green box is highlighting our cell. I'm going to go ahead and click on A1. And we're going to go ahead and just type what we want it to say here in A1. So I'm going to go ahead and type egg, meaning this is one breakfast food that I'm going to put on our table. I'm also going to put oatmeal. And then I'm going to add orange, if I can type orange. Okay. And then when you want to move to another cell, you can do a few things. Like let's say you're typing egg, you can press tab to move to the right, or you can press enter. That's generally going to move you down. You can also use the arrow keys, and that will allow you to navigate potentially quicker depending on your work style. Let's go ahead and add some numbers. Let's add some data to this table. Let's say that each of these rows is one person's breakfast setup. Let's say one person eats 2 eggs, 1 bowl of oatmeal, and 1 orange. That seems like a pretty reasonable breakfast. Let's say someone else eats 1 egg, maybe 2 bowls of oatmeal. They really like oatmeal. And then let's say even 1.5 oranges. That's okay. We can do decimals and a lot of other types of numeric data. And then let's go a little bit bonkers. Let's say this third person is just really feeling like eating eggs. So they eat 78 eggs, they eat 56 bowls of oatmeal, and they eat 2.74 oranges. Like, we're not going to worry too much about that in real life, but let's go ahead and say, for the sake of demonstration, they're going to eat 2.74 oranges. Well, now we have a data table that we can do some cool stuff with. First, we're going to go ahead and practice sorting with this data, and you can totally follow along. You can create your own data table, however you want to do it. What we're going to do, we're going to practice some sorting. So there's a few ways we can do this. One way is by selecting one column that we want to sort. So let's say that I want to sort based on column A. I'll go ahead and hover my cursor over to the top of the column. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the letter A, and it's going to go ahead and select the entire column. Now, I'll go ahead and go over to this sort and filter tool, and I'm going to go ahead and say, let's sort largest to smallest. And it's going to give me a little pop-up saying, hey, like, just so you know, this is only selecting one column. Do you want to sort the entire data table based on the largest values here? Or do you want to just sort this individual column? So we'll try both. Let's see what happens if I keep this selected and expand the selection. I'll click sort. And this is cool because this is basically sorting the entire table based on the largest to smallest values in the egg column. So this person who ate just a ton of eggs and oatmeal, the information is retained across the row for what they ate for oatmeal and for oranges. But let's go ahead and undo that, and let's say instead of expanding, let's not expand. Let's just continue with the current selection. And you might want to think about what you predict will happen if we do this. Let's go ahead and sort it. Boom. So what's happening is now it's just sorting column A, but it's not incorporating the rest of the table. Yeah, it's really just incorporating that column. So that's something to keep in mind as you're sorting your data table. Your rows generally are going to want to stay where they're at. So generally you want to go ahead and expand that selection, at least if you're using this specific sort tool right there. There's so many other ways to sort, and there's a lot of custom sorting things, but we're going to go ahead and just stick with that for now. Now let's create a chart from our data. So we have some data. Let's go ahead and do that. So what's cool about Excel is that there's so many ways to customize things down to the nitty-gritty, fine-tuned details. But there's also a lot of ways to kind of let Excel do some of that work for you and do some of the thinking for you and let it suggest some good ways forward. So we're going to let Excel recommend some ideas for us. First, we're going to highlight all the table data that we want to make a chart out of. Then we're going to go ahead and go over to Insert, because as we might remember, that's where the charts and graphs live. And then let's go ahead and click recommended charts. Let's see what happens. And what's cool about clicking recommended charts is that Excel is literally just going to tell us, hey, like these are some charts that actually would work well for your data. So we have a clustered column chart, a few different varieties, clustered bar, stacked column, and then some of these don't work as well. Like a line chart doesn't really make that much sense for our purposes. Stacked column, funnel, also a little weird. 100% stacked could be interesting, but we're gonna go ahead and try a clustered column. So let's go ahead and do that. So what's happening here is essentially Excel is essentially making a chart for each person's consumption based on this data. So we can see that person 1 only ate like a very reasonable amount of food across the board. Person 3, on the other hand, as we saw, ate 78 eggs, a lot of oatmeal, and then almost 3 oranges. What's nice is that it's automatically reflected in our graph, and we can change anything about this graph. Like we can change the chart title, we can call this breakfast food for 3 people. We can change the series, so if we want to do select data, we can go ahead and, let me backtrack a little bit. Let's say we're wondering, okay, Daniel, where do these numbers come from out the bottom? Well, these are automatically assigned to each, what we're calling person, to each series, really, which is each row. But if we want them to be more specific than 1, 2, 3, we can do that by right-clicking on this. And this isn't just for the series. If you want to change any aspect of a chart, just right-click. And then you have a lot of options for how to go about editing things. So in this case, if we want to change the numbers, we can right-click and then do select data. And then for the horizontal axis labels, we just go over to edit. And then interestingly, this wants a range for the different axis labels. And I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then I'll go ahead and explain in a second. So I'm going to back out real quick. I'm going to add some names right here. I'm going to add Bob, Jimbo, and Potato Cat. Excellent. So these are very common names, if you don't know. I'm kidding. And then let me go ahead and do this. And then, voila. Okay, cool. So what did I just do? Basically, I added some names right here. And if we want, we can even do this real quick. Check this out. If it seems a little bit arbitrary what I'm doing, basically, I'm adding the names of the people that are eating these breakfasts. So they're Bob, Jimbo, Potato Cat. I added the data down here. And then I added a column to the left of what was originally column A, which was right here. And then I moved those names over there. So these 3 names are pulling straight from these cells. So if we change this to Bobcat, then that's going to change in the chart. If we change this to Vader, it's going to change that in the chart, which is pretty nice for our purposes. And what's cool, that makes me think it's worth pointing out that not only is it going to change the names, it'll automatically change as our data changes. So that's what's really nice about Excel. You can let Excel work with you as you manipulate data, as you do statistical analyses, as you change values, and it will work with you to automatically update things. So that is how to do a chart, especially to use a recommended chart. Another thing I wanted to talk about are some basic functions. So going back to our data table over here, let's go ahead and calculate some stuff. Let's start with the sum total of items that each person ate. We can do that by going over to a cell, and whenever you want to use a function in Excel, you want to start by clicking or pressing enter, and then you want to type the function name. Let's say you're like, oh, I feel like I don't really know exactly what that formula is. You can just start typing, and let's say you think it starts with C. You can scroll through here and you're like, oh, it's actually the ceiling function, or it's the cube test, or the cube member, all that, that's chill. We're not talking about those specifically here. But if you're also a little bit wondering like, oh, what is that formula? You can go over to formulas. And let's say for our purposes, like we said, we want to get the sum total of items that they ate. Well, that might be in math and trig. Let's check it out. So we're looking for something that's like sum. Oh, okay, yeah, sum. So if we hover over it, it'll tell us what it does. Adds all the numbers in a range of cells. That's great. That's literally what we want. So we can go ahead and do sum. And what's cool about this setup is it's going to help us a lot by prompting us to select the range that we want to add up. So we can go ahead and just press this little arrow up thing, hover over what we want, and then let's click OK. Let's see what happens. Boom. Yeah, so that worked. 2 + 1 + 1 = 4. And if we're wondering how to extend that down here, we might think, oh, we need to like retype it, like sum B3 to D3. So that's the notation for if you want to do it manually. You just type in the cell name. So if we notice, if we click on this one up here in the left corner, it's saying the name. So column B, row 3, so that's B3. But you don't have to do it manually like I did. What's cool about Excel, one of the many cool things is that you can actually do stuff like click and drag, and boom, that automatically does it for you. Or even better yet, you don't even have to click and drag. A lot of times you can just double click down here. So once you see this black cursor, like crosshair, you just double click, boom, automatically did it. So I mentioned it's the black crosshair because right now it's a white crosshair with a shadow, and that's just to select. But if you want to get to that functionality to be able to extend a formula, you want to go down to this little green square, wait till you see the black crosshair, boom, double click, that'll do it. And then we can put up here sum. Let's say we want to find the average. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do that. So press equals, and then we're like, well, average starts with an A. Let's see, if it comes up, because they're not always going to be the whole word. It might just be like AVG or something. But for the case of average, it is the whole word. So average is just going to return the arithmetic mean of the inputs. So we can click tab. That's what I did to do that. And what's cool is it's telling us, hey, this is the notation for using this formula. And I can type it manually. I can type B2 colon E2. That would do it. Or actually, no, because I don't want to include the sum. I just want to include what Bob Catter ate. So I'll go ahead and do D2. Boom. And then as we remember, we just go over here, double click, boom. Okay. And then there's a lot more we can do. But that's pretty good for some basic functions. One more function I'll do is count. So this is just going to count the number of types. Count. This is just going to count the number of different types of things that each person is eating. So I'll go ahead and B2, D2. Okay. And it should be 3 for all of them. And it is 3 for all of them because it's 3 different kinds of things that each person is eating. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay, so I hope that was a helpful overview of some of the basic functionalities of Excel. We're gonna go ahead and move on to a bit of a slightly more intermediate sort of thing with Excel. So we're gonna go ahead and I'll just name this fundamentals, and then we'll move on to intermediate. So I just added a new sheet. What we're gonna do for this first intermediate exercise is create a new tab. So as we notice, there's 11 up here in the Microsoft or in the Windows version of Excel. In the Mac version, it's pretty similar. I think it may be slightly different names for help and maybe not Acrobat, but regardless, we're gonna add our own tab. So to do that, we start by going to File and then Options. So there's a lot going on here if you're new to Excel, but don't worry, it's pretty chill. We're just gonna be over here in Customize Ribbon. So we can click on that. And if we check this out to the right, these are all the different main tabs that are already ready to go. Within each tab, there's different groups. So we can go ahead and collapse that. We want to add our own. So let's go ahead and do New Tab. And it pops up right here. We can move it anywhere. And let's say I'm like, you know what? I want it right after File. Well, I'll just put it right here. And let me name this Daniel's Tools. So I just clicked rename. Boom, Daniel's Tools, boom. Okay, you can name it your name tools. You can say my tools, whatever you would like to do it. This group, I'm gonna name this useful stuff. And then I'm gonna have a smiley face as the icon. And then that'll become clear in a second. So what do I want in this useful stuff tab? Well, I can select from some of these popular commands. Maybe I want to have the superscript tool. Okay, cool. Maybe instead I want to look at all commands that are available. And there's a lot. I'll add, 3D model. Maybe I want to insert a 3D model. That sounds pretty cool. Maybe add a digital signature. That sounds pretty useful. And brightness. Yeah, that sounds good. What if I want to add another group to this tab? Okay, yeah, great. Maybe this is even more useful stuff. You know, that's pretty cool. I'll add the tilde, just leave it. I like that. And then paint, Bob Ross, that's cool. Camera for sure, super useful. Okay, and you can see what I'm doing. I'm just adding whatever I feel like. I'll add the elbow connector, of course. Once you're all good with your setup, you can go ahead and click OK. Boom. Now, this heading changed to where there's not 11, but 12 tabs, and one is Daniel's Tools. So let's say I'm like, oh, okay, 45, and I want to make that superscript. Boom, done. Just like that, made a superscript using my tool that I added right here. So it's so nice if you have a set of tools that you use a lot. As you get more familiar with Excel, you can just add them to your own tab and have those so readily accessible without having to look really hard for them. So that's what's really nice about that. Getting into another type of intermediate level thing, we're gonna go ahead and open up a data set. So we're gonna actually use a publicly available data set from Kaggle. And if you haven't used Kaggle before, it is awesome. Great repository of data sets, and it's an awesome way to learn with the community how to do data science, data analytics. There's a lot of Kaggle competitions where you can actually win money if you help the community to solve machine learning and other data science puzzles. So definitely worth checking out. Let's go ahead and look at this iris flower data set, which is a pretty well-regarded data set. It's pretty famous just for being used for so many practice things, for helping people learn how to create graphs in Python, helping people learn how to work with data sets. Let's go ahead and download this, and then I'm gonna go ahead and extract it and everything. Yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and go to where I downloaded and exported or rather unzipped the zip file. So I'm gonna go open that up, and then in this, on the link, if you're following the link, it might not pop up because it might need to be outside of this option where it says all Excel files. Because the way I downloaded it was as a CSV, comma separated values file. So I'm gonna go ahead and just switch that to all files, and then boom, already pops up. Let's go ahead and open that up. Boom, yep, so this is looking pretty good. One thing is that it's currently opened in a different file. Let's say I wanna actually move it to my original file that I was working on. Well, I can go ahead and do that. I can say move and then to book, it's going to move to this other workbook that I was working on with the potato and all the other stuff. And boom, moved it, done. And I can actually delete this. I don't need this anymore. Yep, that's fine. I'm glad it tells me like, oh, are you sure you want to delete it? So now we're back to this workbook where I have book 1, and then I have Iris, this new data set. Now we have this data set, and we're going to do some fun stuff with it just for a bit. Let's go ahead and select everything and see what kind of charts it's recommended here. So we have a lot of different options here. This one's kind of cool, actually. Let's just see what happens. Huh. Yeah, that is weird, but it's kind of cool. Yeah. So essentially what's happening is each of these data points is one different value here. So we have, looks like 150 different values, which makes sense. So it's going from 1 to 150, and it's just charting the actual value of that individual flower's sepal width, length, and petal length, petal width. But it looks really cool. Like, honestly, this could just be some nice graphical art. It's not super useful to use as is, but it is cool. So that's one cool thing. And we could do a lot of stuff with this data set, but we're actually just gonna stop there as the intermediate sort of thing. So in this video, we talked briefly about some of the basics of Excel's user interface and some of the basic functionalities that you can do, and a little bit of some more intermediate things. We'll be talking in future videos about more advanced things, like once Excel integrates with Python, we'll be diving into that for sure. But I hope this was somewhat helpful, and let me know if you have any feedback, any questions you have. I'm always responsive, so happy to answer any questions. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.